First on Joe Biden, having been forced now to slash his 3.5 signature infrastructure bill in half and to throw out the key piece of climate legislation within that bill, both on account of the objection of the Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. There is now no chance that Joe Biden will turn up to Glasgow with his climate legislation having been passed, which is what he desperately wanted. He is now hoping that he will bring a framework of that legislation and that he'll turn up with a $500 billion check to spend on climate, and that will be enough to persuade the attendees in Glasgow that America is still the climate leader. Even if that framework, I have to say, has not yet been agreed, and nor is it clear what climate policy will replace the policy that Joe Biden has been forced to ditch. Well, I did catch up earlier with the Democratic Congressman, as you said, Ro Khanna, who is part of the key negotiations and also chairing the grilling tomorrow of the oil and gas majors. And I started by asking him how disappointed he was that Senator Manchin had got his way and that he'd forced Joe Biden to remove his clean energy program, his signature legislation, from that bill.
Do I believe that it would have been better if the clean electricity program had passed? Of course. But the reality of politics is you have to look at the hand we've been dealt, which is a 3-seat majority in the House, a tie in the Senate, not a single Republican willing to cross the aisle on climate. And under that circumstance, I think the president is doing the absolute best that he can.
But how critical is it that he gets this done ahead of travelling to Glasgow for COP26?
It is critical, and the president has said that to us, that he needs this win before going to Glasgow. He wants to stand and show that America is leading, that America is back, that America is capable of governing. That is the deadline. It's not an arbitrary deadline on October 31st. It's really
the day before he turns out.
Yes. Can we send him to Glasgow as our representative of our nation with the credibility that he needs to say America is leading on climate?
What if you can't, Congressman?
You can't look at one setback, one failure as the end. We have no other choice. We have to tackle the climate crisis. The young generation in this country is very, very mobilized. They are deeply committed to this. This is the top issue. And so we have a politics right now that isn't reflective of where the population is. But that will change. And the question is how much damage is going to happen until that change takes place.
Isn't the worry here, though, that precisely what Keith McCoy talked about, nobbling certain lawmakers, isn't that exactly what we are seeing playing out right now in terms of the stalling of Joe Biden's domestic agenda, including, crucially, his climate change legislation, given that the two holdout senators were on Exxon's list? And one of them, as you well know, Senator Manchin, was referred to as the kingmaker.
Well, there's definitely a concern about the special interest and the role of special interests in killing significant climate legislation and trying to kill the clean energy program. And that's why having a magnifying glass on these companies at this moment is so critical. You know, the great British novelist Salman Rushdie said there are no secrets in American democracy. Eventually everything gets out. For a long time, the oil companies have had the ability to keep secrets because there wasn't a spotlight on them. Now that there's a spotlight on them, that's going to be much harder. Everything will get out.
Congressman, you said emphatically that you want the chief executives, the big cheeses from the oil and gas firms, to appear. Is that still happening?
It is happening, and it's historic. They have never had to come before the United States Congress before to explain their role in climate disinformation or to account for the misrepresentations they made to the American public. They're going to have to answer on October 28th.
And what about Keith McCoy? It was our program that played the undercover footage.
Well, it was outrageous, and it also was a catalyst in moving the hearing and making it a priority and in capturing public sentiment. So McCoy saying that basically they were trying to kill the carbon tax while Exxon is saying exactly the opposite was an example of deception. One of the important things to note is the hearing is just going to be a beginning of a year-long investigation.
But do you really think that the chief executives of 4 of the world's biggest oil and gas companies are going to put their hand up and say, look, yes, we do what we can to throw doubt and seeds of doubt about the science? Do you think they're going to say that?
I don't know what they're going to say. All I can tell you is that lying to Congress is a very, very grave crime, and we have a lot of incriminating evidence. Yeah, well, we're first going to ask them, and then if they are misrepresenting, then we'll share the evidence. I would caution them to err on the side of truth.
Would you not expect, with the system the way it's set up, that they would say one thing, but then obviously there's a whole lobbying industry, it's not illegal? Doesn't that set up a conflict that you're bound to have them saying one thing in public and doing another in private?
You know, when those tobacco executives said nicotine wasn't addictive, that was a turning point. The eyes of the public shifted, and my guess is if they took an approach like that, they would make a colossal mistake by trying to mislead or hedge. My advice would be come clean early, because we have a lot of the incriminating evidence.
Well, Senator Manchin said today there was still an awful lot of work to be done. He said to reach an agreement with Joe Biden. Things could get a bit sticky for Joe Manchin, though, especially if they decide to call Keith McCoy to give evidence. I did ask Congressman Khanna if they plan to do that. He said they may. My guess is that they will, that Keith McCoy will then decline, and that the committee will then be forced to use the only option they have to subpoena him, to force him to take the stand. Watch this space, Matt.